My name is Thomas Reed, and I was the lead systems engineer at Ardent Realty Solutions for 18 years. I was 54 when they let me go. The reason? I was too expensive. That's what the new CTO, Ethan Clark, told me as he slid my severance papers across the polished conference table. We could hire 3 fresh grads for what we pay you, he said with a smug grin. Like this was some kind of smart business move. Nothing personal, just streamlining. Nothing personal. Right. I'd built their entire IT infrastructure from scratch. Back when the company had 4 buildings and a dial-up connection. I designed, coded, implemented, and maintained a proprietary system that scaled with them as they grew to manage over 60 properties across multiple states. Every expansion, every upgrade, every recovery from outages that could have tanked our service, I handled all of it. Quietly. Reliably. Now, someone with 6 months in the job thought I was just a cost on a spreadsheet. The HR rep tried to soften the blow. It's a generous package, she said, as if that made it feel any less insulting. 2 months of pay, vacation payout. And the vague promise of, maybe, consulting later. I took the folder without saying much. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. Let them think I was being professional. The truth? I was exhausted, done. They asked me to stay a few weeks to train the junior team. I nodded, but I already knew I wouldn't. I boxed up nearly 2 decades of my work into one cardboard box, nodded at a few coworkers, and walked out without looking back. They thought they could replace me with a few cheaper hires. They had no idea what they were really losing. It didn't take long for things to unravel. Just 2 weeks after I walked out of Ardent Realty's office for the last time, the first call came. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. But the voicemail made it clear. Thomas, this is Ethan, the CTO. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The new team's running into a few challenges with the architecture. Just looking for a quick consult. I ignored it. By noon, there were 2 more messages. By 5 p.m., 4. The tone shifted from confident to uneasy to borderline panicked. They couldn't make sense of the core systems, the same ones I tried for years to get documented, but was always told were too costly to bother with. That night, I got a text from Jared, the database specialist I'd hired 11 years ago. Tom, system's been down since this morning. Ethan's losing it. Maintenance requests are stuck. No payments are going through. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat out on the back porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sun dip into Lake Erie. My wife, Marie, placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? I shook my head. They're just finding out what I was actually worth. The next morning, HR called. Same woman from my termination meeting, now with a whole different tone. Thomas. We'd like to offer you a temporary consulting agreement. It's urgent. Compensation would be generous. How generous? I asked. $300 per hour. Minimum 4 hours per session. I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. Not yet. They hadn't respected the value I brought when they had it. Now, they were paying the price, literally. 3 days after that call from HR, I received an email that made me sit up a little straighter in my chair. Subject line, Opportunity at Meridian Systems. I recognized the name immediately. Meridian was a regional competitor of Ardent Realty, smaller, yes, but steadily growing and gaining attention in the industry. The sender? Lance Merrick, their Director of Technology. Thomas. I heard about your recent departure from Ardent. We've followed your work for years. I'd love to talk if you're open to exploring new opportunities. We set up a meeting for the following morning. Not over Zoom, he wanted to meet in person, at a quiet cafe on the east side of Cleveland. When I arrived, Lance stood up to shake my hand, warm smile on his face, no suits, no corporate games. "I've been trying to reverse engineer parts of your infrastructure for years," he said with a chuckle over coffee. "What you built at Ardent, it's elegant, efficient, and nearly impossible to replicate without the mind that built it." I raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me you want to copy it?" "No," he said, leaning forward. "I want you to build something better, with us. Ground up. Clean slate. We've outgrown our current system and we need someone who doesn't just understand the technology, but how to scale it the right way. And you think that's me? I know it's you. That's why I'm offering you the role of Chief Systems Architect. Full benefits, equity, and a salary 25% higher than what Ardent was paying." It was a strong offer, better than I'd expected. "You're not worried I'm too expensive?" I asked, a half-smile tugging at my lips. Lance laughed. "That's the problem with companies like Ardent. They think saving money means cutting experience. We're not making that mistake." I shook his hand. "Then you've got yourself an architect." For the first time in weeks, I felt excited again, not just to work, but to build. This time, on my terms. While I settled into my new role at Meridian Systems, things at Ardent Realty were spiraling. Jared, my old database admin, kept me loosely updated through brief texts. "Payment systems still down," he wrote one afternoon. "They brought in outside consultants. Nothing syncing right." A few days later, tenant portals crashing under load. "People can't pay rent." Then, 1 week into my new job, I got another call, Ethan Clark again. This time, I answered. "Thomas, we're in serious trouble. We've lost access to our payment records for the last quarter. The consultants are asking for insight into the database schema. You're the only one who really understood how it was all connected." "I'm employed now, Ethan," I replied calmly. "Exclusive contract. We'll double whatever they're paying you. Just 2 days of help. It's not about the money." "Then what is it? You getting a kick out of watching us flail?" I paused. "No, Ethan. But you made a choice. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're seeing what that really meant." He was quiet for a beat. Then the threat came. "You do realize this could become legal, right? If we determine you intentionally made the system difficult to maintain, or withheld documentation." "There was no documentation," I interrupted. "Because Ardent refused to fund a team to create it." I asked, repeatedly. "Every line of code belongs to the company. I've taken nothing except my experience. And your legal team is welcome to contact mine." I hung up with my hands steady, but my jaw tight. It wasn't the threat that got to me, it was the audacity. The same people who called me too expensive were now scrambling to fix what they didn't understand, and blaming me for their own short-sightedness. Meanwhile, at Meridian, I was doing things right from day one: structured documentation, redundancy planning, proper team training. No more hidden knowledge. No more silent burdens. Let Ardent burn. I had better things to build. 2 weeks into my new role at Meridian Systems, I heard a knock at my office door. I looked up to see Jared. The same database admin who'd stuck with me through years of chaos at Ardent. He looked worn out, holding a laptop bag like it weighed 100 pounds. "Got time for lunch?" he asked. We walked to a small deli down the street. Over turkey sandwiches and coffee, Jared leaned in and spoke low, despite the casual setting. "It's worse than you think," he said. "They've lost access to historical payment records going back 3 years. The backup systems are corrupted, no one knows how to restore them." I nodded, not surprised. The backup system had been my design, secure, redundant, but strict. Miss a step, and the recovery would fail. That was the point, to protect tenant data from tampering or unauthorized access. That's not all, Jared added. I found something while trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing structure. He opened his laptop and showed me a series of emails he'd recovered from Ardent's system archives. They were between Ethan Clark and several board members, emails I was never meant to see. Subject lines like, legacy staff reduction strategy, and, read phase-out timeline. He planned it, Jared said. 4 months. He told the board that your systems were too expensive to maintain and that they could swap you out for off-the-shelf software and junior engineers. Promised them $1 million in annual savings. I scrolled through the messages. One line from Ethan stuck out. Reed's made himself indispensable by design. The system complexity isn't necessary, it's a power play. That one hit harder than I expected. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Jared closed the laptop. Because I quit yesterday. And I'm not the only one. Half the IT team's gone. And Ardent's biggest client? Northgate Communities, they're considering pulling out. I sat back, letting that settle in. The reckoning Ethan thought he'd avoid. It was already here. Later that evening, just as I was reviewing network architecture diagrams for Meridian's newest rollout, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to pick up. It was Ethan Clark, his voice stripped of the arrogance it once carried. Thomas, please. The situation is critical. Northgate Communities is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is panicking. They're questioning all of my decisions. I said nothing, letting him sit in the silence he'd earned. We need your help, he continued. Name your price. Anything. We'll triple the original offer. Full access, full authority, anything you want. It's not about money, I said flatly. Then what is it? You want revenge? Is that what this is? I paused. No. Ethan. I'm not interested in revenge. I just don't believe in cleaning up messes for people who never respected what went into keeping things running in the first place. The silence on the other end was thick. You knew this would happen, he said finally. You knew exactly what would break and when. I sighed. No, I just knew what I had built. And I knew how fragile it would become without proper oversight, documentation, or training. Things I offered again and again, and was turned down for. You made a business decision. This is just the consequence of it. He tried once more. The board is willing to bring you back. Full salary. Signing bonus. No restrictions. I felt a flicker of something, maybe satisfaction. Maybe irony, but it passed quickly. I'm committed to Meridian now, I said. We're building something that's meant to last. I'm not going back. His voice hardened. This could get legal. Non-compete clauses. IP violations. I smiled. Every line of code belongs to Ardent. The problem is, no one left knows what any of it means. And with that, I ended the call, not out of spite, but with the clarity of someone who had finally moved on. A month into my role at Meridian Systems, I had just finished a systems integration meeting when my assistant poked her head into my office. Thomas, someone here to see you. Says he used to work with you. I walked out to find Jared, standing in the lobby with a sheepish grin and a familiar laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Got time for lunch? He asked. Over sandwiches at the same deli we'd met in weeks before, he brought me up to speed. Ardent's worse off than anyone thought, he said, voice low. They've completely lost access to historical data, 3 years of records. The consultants can't recover the backups. Turns out the system you designed was too secure for its own good if you didn't follow every step correctly. I nodded. That redundancy was intentional, to protect tenant data, not sabotage anyone. But they never took the time to learn it. Northgate's already pulled half their properties. Word is, they'll cancel the rest of their contract by next month. That would gut Ardent's revenue. Northgate accounted for nearly a third of their portfolio. Jared leaned in. The consultants say it could take 6 months to restore full functionality, if they even can. Most of the IT teams already jumped ship. I took a sip of my coffee. And you? I left too. Which is why I'm here. You hiring? I smiled. You want to join Meridian? Only if I can work with someone who actually knows what they're doing. That afternoon, I spoke with Lance Merrick, our director of technology. Told him Jared was a must-hire. Lance agreed without hesitation. We were building something real, brick by brick, with people who actually cared about what they built. That evening, as I reviewed Jared's onboarding paperwork, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. The message was short. Northgate just terminated the contract. The board wants to talk. Please call me. I didn't. By the end of the following week, it was official, Northgate Communities had terminated their contract with Ardent Realty. I didn't need Jared to confirm it. The news hit industry feeds and circulated through property management forums like wildfire. Ardent's largest client walking away was the kind of event that made investors panic and competitors circle like sharks. Later that day, Lance Merrick called me into his office at Meridian Systems. I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Northgate, he said, referring to Northgate's CEO. They're in a bind. With Ardent imploding. They want to know if we can take over their entire property portfolio, nearly 10,000 units. I raised an eyebrow. That would more than double our current load. The new system's solid. But we're not quite ready for that kind of scale. Lance nodded. Jeffrey knows that. He's willing to fund an infrastructure expansion and give us 12 weeks to prepare. I leaned back, thinking. We'll need at least 3 more senior engineers, dedicated servers, and a phased migration plan. 8 weeks minimum to build, 4 for testing and rollout. Even then, it'll be tight. Doable? With the right team, yes. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with diagrams, scaling strategies, and worst-case scenarios. I sketched out a hybrid migration model, one that would let us onboard Northgate properties in stages without risking core stability. By morning, I had a working plan. I presented it to Lance, outlining every step with contingencies in place. This will add 3 weeks to the schedule for documentation, he noted. It's non-negotiable, I said firmly. We don't make Ardent's mistake. Everything gets documented. Everyone gets trained. No heroes. No mysteries. He smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building something right. Proving that quality, process, and respect for the craft still mattered. And if we did it well, Ardent's collapse wouldn't just be a cautionary tale, it would be the reason Meridian rose. 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, everything was on track. The infrastructure had been scaled, the core modules tested, and the documentation was thorough, every line, every subsystem. Northgate's confidence in us only grew with each weekly update. Then, one afternoon, Lance Merrick asked me to join him in the executive conference room. Inside was a face I hadn't expected. Jeffrey Northgate, the CEO himself. So, he said, extending a hand, you're the architect who rescued our operations. I shook his hand, cautiously. Just trying to build systems that work. Jeffrey chuckled. You used to work for Ardent, didn't you? I nodded. They're in freefall. The private equity firm that owns them is trying to sell. But with Northgate gone and their systems still barely functioning, nobody's biting. Lance cleared his throat. Actually, we're considering making an offer, buying Ardent outright. I blinked. Seriously? At a quarter of the valuation they had 6 months ago, Lance said. If the deal goes through, we'll need someone to lead the integration, salvage what's useful. Migrate everything to your architecture, and ensure continuity. They both looked at me. You're asking if I'd be willing to go back, I said. Not to work for them, Lance clarified. To lead the transition on our terms. Only if you're comfortable with it. I sat back, letting the irony wash over me. The company that discarded me now stood to be absorbed into the system I'd helped build, on my terms, with my values. I'll do it, I said. But only one way. Lance leaned in. What's that? We do it right. Full documentation. No shortcuts. Proper training. Every engineer knows the system inside and out. I won't build another black box. He smiled. Then it's yours. No triumph. No smug satisfaction. Just clarity. They threw me out. Now I'd be the one rebuilding everything, better, cleaner, smarter. 6 months after the acquisition. I stood in the lobby of what used to be Ardent Realty's headquarters. The brushed aluminum sign that once bore their logo had been replaced with bold lettering. Meridian Integrated Property Management. I hadn't been back since the day I left with a single cardboard box. But now, I wasn't returning as a former employee, I was stepping in as Chief Integration Officer, leading the technical merger between two companies. Lance Merrick walked beside me as we moved through the halls. Some of the faces looked away when they saw me. Others offered quick, uncertain nods. A few, those who had worked closely with me, gave quiet smiles of relief. Ethan Clark was long gone. So was most of the executive team that had signed off on my termination. The company had been gutted, what remained was a skeleton crew trying to hold together a crumbling system. Now, they were under our banner, and my leadership. In the old server room, the one I'd once treated like my personal lab, I paused. Through the glass, I saw the aging hardware I'd specified years ago. Blinking lights, humming drives. The bones of a system that had once been ahead of its time. Want to step in? Lance asked. I shook my head. No need. We'll be migrating everything anyway. In the main conference room. The remaining Ardent staff had gathered. Lance introduced me. Many of you already know Thomas Reed. He built the original systems that supported this company for nearly 2 decades. Now, he'll lead us through a complete transformation, one built to last. I looked around. No speech about vengeance. No, I told you so. Instead, I walked them through the integration plan. The documentation process, the training structure. I promised transparency, stability, and respect for the work ahead. This wasn't about the past. It was about doing things right from here on out. A year after the acquisition, Meridian Integrated Property Management had become the largest firm of its kind in the Northeast. Every property, new and legacy, was now running on the system I had designed, modular, scalable, secure, and, most importantly, fully documented. One crisp autumn morning, I drove along Lake Erie toward our headquarters for what would be my final meeting as Chief Integration Officer. The leaves had turned fiery shades of red and gold. The kind of colors that remind you change can be beautiful, if you do it right. Lance Merrick greeted me with a grin as I stepped into his office. The board approved your proposal, he said. The Technical Education Division launches next quarter. You'll have full control, curriculum, hiring, strategy. Everything. That had been my one condition for staying after the integration was complete, not more money or a new title, but the chance to build something that would outlast me. A training program for future systems engineers. Not just to teach code, but to teach craft. Responsibility. Thinking long term. Thank you, I said. This means a lot. No, Lance replied. Thank you. What you've built here, it's more than tech. It's a culture. Documentation, accountability, clarity, those things don't come from tools. They come from leadership. Later that afternoon, I packed up my office, not like the last time, when I was pushed out. This was a transition on my terms, with purpose and pride. As I stepped outside, Justin Caldwell, the former owner's son, met me in the courtyard. My father asked about you, he said. He's retired now, but he was glad to hear you were back. In a way. How's he doing? I asked. Fishing in Florida. Still says letting you go was the biggest mistake the company ever made. I just smiled. Driving home along the lake, I thought about value. Not the kind that shows up in spreadsheets, but the kind that lasts. The kind you build patiently, piece by piece, with care. I hadn't needed revenge. Just proof. And I'd built it.